And we will. All right. And so we're going to get started shortly. Tonight, we're going to be hearing the story, not yet told, from the WNBA Players Association members' work over the last couple of years to build unity and focus and trust around their social justice work, and how they won an MOU, back to work agreement, which gave them the right for Black lives on the court and off the court. And so before we get started, I want to take a moment to introduce myself. And I'm Cheryl Coney. I am Secretary of the United Association for Labor Education. And I'm excited to be here with you all at the 2021 Summer Institute for Union Women. This year's theme is Women Workers, Essential, Brilliant, and Powerful. And it's great. This year's conference is virtual, and it's given us the opportunity to go international. So we have folks that have been joining us on the computer from all across the country, and in some other countries as well. I want to, before we get started on our session, I wanted to, there'll be a screening of, we'll be talking a bit tonight or this afternoon, depending on which time zone you are, on about the documentary, the ESPN documentary 144, which we will be streaming for Summer Institute, for Women's School attendees tomorrow afternoon. But for folks that are tuning in on Facebook Live, if you'd like to watch it, you can check it out at espn.com, and you should be able to view it there. And before we get started with the session and I introduce our panelists, I wanted to show a quick snippet of the film.
Really love advertisements. Wonderful. Sorry guys, just a sec. I clicked on the ad.
Is it just me or is there no sound?
There's no sound. As someone who's ran into this issue on Zoom, when you do the share screen, make sure in the left bottom left corner, there's an option for audio, and that should secure it. As someone who's played plenty of songs.
It was amazing to see the uptake of the recognition that Black women are also killed. I have to say that our mothers of the movement, these are mothers of daughters who've been killed by the police, sisters of women who've been killed by the police. It was such a tremendous recognition for them. You know, you lose someone to police violence, but then when the community doesn't know about it, when their names aren't mentioned in marches and protests, there's another loss, there's another tragedy.
In the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends, said Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
So again, that was the clip from the ESPN documentary 144. I actually had the privilege of watching it earlier this week, and I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't already seen it, to check it out, because it is definitely worth a watch. And I want to thank everyone again for tuning in today for this plenary session, and I want to take a moment to introduce our panelists. And today we will be hearing from Terry Jackson, the Executive Director from the Women's National Basketball Players Association. And Crystal Langhorn from Seattle Storms, the Seattle Storms Director of Community Engagement for Seattle's Force for Change, as well as a former Seattle Storm bargaining team member. And Bianca Cunningham, the campaigns director from the Action Center on Race and the Economy. So thank you all for being here today. And I want to start out by saying, you know, the players of the Women's National Basketball League are amazing and brilliant athletes. And tonight, though we are going to talk about them as women and as workers and as community members and trade unionists. We want to talk about the roles that you play and how you hold them. And Crystal, I'd like to ask you, can you share with us a little what kind of union you all have built?
Yeah, so when you look at our league is a majority Black women, and regardless of race, we have a large amount of players that identify as LGBTQ. So we have a different viewpoint of the world. We come from groups that are marginalized, and we know what it's like to be the other. So we fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone. And I think that's really what our league union represents.
And I know the very first actions around social justice by the WNBA that we know about was 5 years ago with Maya Moore and the Lynx. And then there were several actions that occurred following that. But how did this work start? And it's continued to grow. And
yeah, I think if you look at the teams at first in 2016, it wasn't cool with kneeling. It wasn't cool with Black Lives Matter. So each team, everyone would do their own thing a little bit. But I feel like with our CBA in 2020, I feel like we came together a lot more, and that carried into the 2020 season with everything with social justice. So I feel like we were a lot more tied in as a league. I feel like everyone really had a strong message together.
Would you say, has the relationship with the league and owners, has it changed?
I would say I can speak from Seattle because I'm not sure what happened with all the other teams, but I know our ownership in Seattle always had our back in 2016 with everything going on. They told us, hey, listen, we have your back with whatever you guys choose to do. And from our organization, you know, we always had the support.
Cheryl, do you mind if I jump in and kind of add to that a little bit?
That would be great, Terry.
Yeah. So in my position as the executive director of the Women's National Basketball Players Association, and again, we're the union, we sit on your side of the table negotiating on behalf of the players. I go back to 2016, which is when I started in this role. And I'm certain that the activism and the advocacy of these players started long before I was in this role, but that's kind of my starting point, at least for now. And yes, you're right. You know, we saw Minnesota come out very boldly and stand for Black Lives Matter, and the other teams thereafter were soon following. What happened though, kind of a precursor to what Crystal was talking about, how we got the CBA negotiations off to such a great start, because what happened in 2016 was the players started a WhatsApp chat. I mean, we all know what WhatsApp is, right? Texting, right? So they started a WhatsApp chat. They added me to it. This was my first introduction to WhatsApp. And there's probably no fewer than 70 or 80 players on this WhatsApp chat. And they are talking in real time about the police violence and how it was affecting Black and brown communities and how they needed to do something. They weren't sure what that something was, but they needed to do something. And so this chat is like pages and pages long. I'm scrolling just to catch up, to the conversation that they're very actively engaged in, and recognizing that they're talking about their families. They're talking about family members who might be in law enforcement, who might be in the military, what protest or what demonstration they might do with respect to the flag, the national anthem, what opportunities they had to show their support for Black Lives Matter. And it kind of all boiled down to a t-shirt. And some people kind of say a t-shirt and kind of dismiss it, but think about that. That was their way to demonstrate how unified they were and how quickly they coalesced around Black Lives Matter and standing up for Black and brown communities, and standing up and recognizing that, the police in Dallas, that the violence had turned on them too, and recognizing that there needed to be a conversation. And so the Lynx started, I think the Liberty were soon thereafter, Dallas, like all the teams were saying, we're gonna get a t-shirt. We want our t-shirt too. And I went to the league at that time and I said, all right, this is what they're talking about. They're coming from a very thoughtful place. They're educating themselves, they're sharing stories, they're looking to strike that right balance where everybody could buy in. Let's support them with this t-shirt. And what we heard from the league was, well, this violates the uniform policy. And I said, no, this is bigger. This is bigger than that. This is bigger than a uniform policy. Let's get them. Let's get behind them on this. And as Crystal said, the rest of the world really wasn't there. Corporate America really wasn't there. Like we saw much of corporate America last year, right? They weren't there in 2016. And so the players kind of said, well, we're going to do this. It was my job to say, the league's going to hold you to this uniform policy and you might be fined. And they said, that's okay. And there were some players, I want to share a little bit more. There were some players who happened to be white who said, and in different situations on their teams, and they said, well, we don't know if we can take a fine like this. Like we're supporting our families. And so the players said, the Black and brown sisters said, we got you. If you stand with us, we got you. We'll pay your fine. Like these were veterans in the league, and they were probably a little bit more well off than this player who happened to be white, but she was a rookie in the year. She was new. And these players said, we got you. We're going to all stand together. And this is how we're going to do it. And so, what's important about that, what needs to be remembered and recorded in history was that 144 players, 12 players on 12 teams stood for this in that moment. And that was just a special moment in the face of fines. And they were fined. They were fined $500. And that wasn't the typical uniform policy violation fine. Typical uniform violation fine was $200. So a $500 fine felt oppressive, felt like a muzzle. That was hard. That was very difficult. So for us to have come, and players were standing up for their communities as we saw things unraveling in Charlottesville soon thereafter, right? So these W players kept doing this. I'm not talking about who was first in this. I love that we see professional athletes using their platforms in this way, but history should note that the W players were kneeling before Cap was kneeling. They just didn't get that attention. And looking back to 2020, they were just so visible because the world had pretty much stopped or was on pause, and there was a spotlight on them. And so where we had gotten to in 2020 was very different place than 2016. So I just wanted to add that.
No, I think that's great. And I think that is something like to think about, like this was happening before the Cap and Colin Kaepernick and getting on a knee, taking a knee. Women in WNBA were leading on this, which is amazing. What can I ask and speak, with the shirts and the fines and the variation, what have these changes meant for the association and players? Is it still the case? Is that still happening? What has changed?
Well, what happened, and Crystal will certainly join in on this, what happened last year in 2020 was, a complete 180. There were players on the floor in warm-up shirts that the league very much endorsed and supported, that said Black Lives Matter on the front, say her name on the back. The league's logo, the union's logo, Nike's logo on the shoulder. I mean, like, you couldn't have told me in 2016 that this would have happened. Maybe had you told me in 2016, I would have slept better for, for 5 years. But nevertheless, we got to that point. The W players, Crystal knows this from her time in the league. She's only recently retired, but the W players have always said advocacy and activism is in our DNA. It is who we are as Black, as brown, as white, as members of the LGBTQ community, as moms. It is who we are. And we are going to be authentic in who we are and represent that and come in that authentic way in our jobs every day. And I think they do a very, very good job about it, because they look to be educated and informed always, always. You will never see or never hear a W player just winging it or shooting from the hip. She really stops and pays attention and reads and learns and listens to others and see how, that aligns with her values and her thinking. And she talks with her sisters too. And that's just so important.
Yeah, like Terry was saying, our league is full of activists, but like we said in 2020, it was cool. It's okay to do Black Lives Matter now. It's okay to have it on the court. So it was more accepted from the league for us to be able to do things like that. So, we took it and we try to amplify as much as we could with anything we could do, with t-shirts on the court, meeting with community leaders, everything we could do. That's what we just try to accomplish as a group.
I think so. There's a lot happening here. It's from 2016 to 2021. Just a lot has changed, and it's just continued to show and demonstrate the activism that's happening, that you all are leading on in the league. And I want to take a moment too to think about, because in addition, what's happened 2016 to 2021, on top of these campaigns and this and uplifting the social justice work, there's also bargaining happening. And so that's happening during this time. And Crystal, I know you were on the bargaining team, but what did that look like? What was the process as you were preparing to bargain as a member of the bargaining team? How did you guys prioritize what you were going to go to the table with?
Yeah, we really wanted to increase pay for players. And we were able to increase our salary cap by 30%. And a huge thing for us was family planning. I think it was huge for players to be able to get full paid maternity leave, a childcare stipend, being able to have workplace accommodations for nursing mothers. Even something like having your own room on the road was huge for players. We used to have to share rooms. We're grown women, people want to have their own space. So even things like that was just really important for us to have as players.
If I can add on to that too, one of the things that we did under our leadership is under Neko Gumake, who's our player president, and we have an executive committee and board of player reps, and Crystal was a member of the board of player reps. Our board of player reps is the highest governing body in the union. And every member of the board of player reps was a member of our CBA committee, of our collective bargaining committee. And so they all played a very active role in addition to our executive committee. So if you can imagine, our CBA committee was probably the largest and most diverse it had ever been in the history of our league and union and the history of negotiations. We had 31 members. There are 2 representatives from each of the teams. So that's the 24. And then there are 7 executive committee members. So that's the 31. And then actually there were a few more because our president said, and anybody else, any other player who wants to be a part of the CBA committee can become a part of the CBA committee, basically because she said so, you know, and we respected that. And there were additional players who joined us. So we were quite large and we were quite diverse. We have players who are international players who are from overseas, countries overseas. They were part of the CBA committee. We had moms who were part of the CBA committee. And so it's always funny to me when people say, okay, so how did negotiations go? What was the structure? You know, what were your priorities? That always makes me laugh because first of all, full disclosure, this was my first CBA negotiation. My first time at the collective bargaining table. As an attorney, I've negotiated contracts, but nothing like this. And this is so freaking intense. So I'm privileged that I had as much help in our player leadership driving. They weren't help, they were driving this. You know, we went through our old CBA. Everybody had to read it. We had to talk about what worked, what didn't work. When we were doing team meetings, right, Crystal, I'm like, okay, tell me how this is working for you. What's not working for you? What are the new suggestions? We really focused in on moms. I've said this a number of times in interviews about the CBA. I can't help but wonder how many players we lost because they became new moms. And we know it's hard enough to be a mom and then a new mom coming back to a team and you don't see the supports like what we have right now. Crystal highlighted them, a childcare stipend, that's big time. You know, a place where a mom can nurse her child or pump, that's big time. The whole family planning, I mean, there's so much that we had in place. In fact, after we negotiated the agreement, I was on a trip and I saw a retired player. And the first thing she said to me was not hello. The first thing she said to me was, I wish I had that childcare stipend. It would have helped. And I kind of ached. I was happy that she even knew about it, that she recognized, you know, the win that we had gotten there. But I kind of ached too. My heart kind of ached because she was right. She was right. How many others had we lost because of that? So in terms of priorities, Crystal knows we had none. Everything was a priority. Like we had no, we got to get this, we got to get that, like our top 3. And the folks that were advising me who had been to the negotiating table before, particularly with this league, they kept saying, okay, but what's our 1, 2, and 3? What's our top 3, our top 5? And I'd get off a call with the players with the CBA committee. And I'd say, did you hear the players? Everything is a priority. We got to go for all of this. And our initial round of proposals, our first set of proposals, we had over 70. That's before the back and forth. We pushed all 70 forward. And this CBA, Crystal knows, doesn't look very much like the other CBAs. We did some work. We did a lot of work.
That is amazing. As as a Black woman, as a worker, as a mother. That is just amazing. You guys are really doing great work. And for all of us folks who are joining in now, who have been on a bargaining team, who have gone to the table to bargain, we know what that fight looks like. I do want to, Bianca, I know I'd like to hear from you on like thinking about some of these wins that Terry and Crystal are highlighting on how these wins can carry over for workers, for all workers.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this story is so familiar for those of us who are part of the broader labor movement, right? Workers everywhere have been faced with some of the same uncertainties that the W players have faced as well. And so I know we haven't gotten to the point yet, but like, you know, Black and brown workers are facing the mental heaviness of having to, you know, witness injustices, both in the workplace and outside of, and not really have an outlet or a way that they feel like they can affect or do something about it. We didn't get to this part yet, but the part about the wobble, I'm really excited to hear about that. But, you know, it's the same thing. We're all dealing with COVID. Many of us are still, you know, we're still in the midst of a pandemic. And so, you know, issues of workplace safety, issues about family members with pre-existing conditions, safety, and just the emotional heaviness that comes with, consuming and witnessing so much collective grief and death, to be frank, around us. And so workers are trying to strike the balance and figure out ways to fight back, and whether they're working at a grocery store or they're on the front line as healthcare workers. And so these issues resonate, I think, with all of us equally. I think, Crystal had mentioned that 80% of the WNBA is Black women. Well, so is the majority of the working class, right? We know that the majority of the working class in the United States is comprised of Black and brown women, mothers, et cetera. And so I'm just thinking of, the parallels here, and I'm imagining the level of frustration and the deep sense that, they talked about the buildup from 2016 to 2020. I think collectively, our working class has also been experiencing that buildup, that something has to change, right? That this can't be the best that we can do. Them talking about their MOU, that's so inspiring. I have to draw parallels to the Chicago teachers, being frustrated, seeing their students experiencing homelessness. And this is educators everywhere, not just in Chicago, but seeing their students experience homelessness, seeing them fall through the cracks and wanting to save them, right? And figuring out that something's got to change with the way we bargain. And so that led them to, demand affordable housing, for the families of their unhoused students, right? And they were able to really highlight that issue and bring it as an issue to the bargaining table, because they saw it as their responsibility to advocate, for their students. This is really similar. And so we call this practice, or this framework, bargaining for the common good. It's an innovative organizing approach where unions use contract fights as an opportunity to organize local stakeholders around a set of demands that benefit not just the bargaining unit, but also the wider community as a whole. We like to think that we have 7 principles of bargaining for the common good. So expand the scope of bargaining beyond wages and benefits. The players mentioned that, not only, were they asking for pay raises, things like pay increases, but they also wanted family planning, full maternity leave, stuff like childcare stipends that we've already covered. And it's just so incredibly important to understand that we do have to be creative with the demands that we're making. I love when Terry's saying we had 70 proposals on the table, like day one out the gate, because like this is we should be demanding the things that we need, right? Not waiting for the employer to tell us what they're going to offer. Bargaining for the common good also includes going on the offense in the campaign by identifying and exposing and challenging the real opposition. And we saw some of that happening in Atlanta, but also like more broader in the league, which is really inspiring. And I'm sure we'll get to that part as well. I'm a little ahead. Another principle is engaging community allies as partners in issue development and the bargaining campaign. the W players were able to reach out and really advocate for the Say Her Name campaign. Like Terry said, they all educated themselves on the issues, reached out to the folks who were doing the work, which is so important. And I love what you said about expanding your bargaining team, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about bringing a number of stakeholders so that we bring diversity in the room. We bring a number of experiences into the bargaining table in the room, and so that we can get an agreement that really does fit and work for all of us. And so that's super important. Centering racial justice in your demands, of course they did that. I mean, this is what this whole thing is about. And then also strengthen internal organizing and membership engagement. I remember the other day when we spoke, you all mentioning that, you know, I think Crystal, you were a rep, right? So it was your job to like make sure that like players knew what was going on in bargaining. And as you all were trying to figure out like what steps you wanted to take in building this campaign, that people were on board. If you all get a chance to watch the film, you can catch a scene of them really in deliberation about like, what are we gonna do, right? Together. And it wasn't an easy conversation. They were struggling together, but it's so important to have that communication open and in a way that people feel like, yeah, I'm getting the right information and I know who I go to get that information. That applies in our unions as well. And then lastly, the campaign doesn't end once the union settles its contract. That's so important to remember. You can hear that from them about, you know, their long fight. You know, we're always building upon our wins. And so there's always a next time. And when we win what we win, we don't say to our community partners, okay, thanks, this is great, right? We say, okay, now how can we build upon this and make it so that it's deeper, so that it's sustainable, so that it's lasting, and that we can win even more in the future. And so important. What they've demonstrated is like forward thinking and a type of creativity that I really think is needed to revitalize our labor movement as a whole. And it's not just them, you know, recently I can announce that SEIU 1199, frontline healthcare workers, there were nursing home workers, also mostly Black women making $13 an hour, right? And the front line in the pandemic and the atrocities that we saw during COVID that happened with nursing homes, and they kind of, and all the social injustice and the murdering of Black and brown people by the police, and they kind of sat back and they were ready for bargaining and said, we're going to do it differently this time. And so what they were able to do was a unit, mostly low wage workers, demanding for not only a raise, and so they were able to win a raise from $13 to $20, right? It's huge. And Juneteenth off and things like that for the unit, but also working across with community partners to demand for things like a 24/7 mobile crisis unit that would replace the police as first responders, which then gives them job security as social workers and healthcare workers, but also is better for the community, right? They were able to win things like an expanded diversion and reentry programs for people who were formerly incarcerated. That is huge. And so I feel like Black women, women of color, union women are leading on these issues all around the country. And it's just such an exciting time for us to be starting to see some of these wins.
No,
Bianca is coming with all the energy, all the energy. I love it. I appreciate this so much because you just schooled me. You just schooled us, right, Crystal? Because we didn't know about the bargaining for the common good and the principles therein. And yet I feel as you went through it, I feel like we lived that and we really worked hard to express that. So thank you for capturing it. And you've reminded me that I really wanted to start off my remarks by thanking Adair, by thanking Cheryl, thanking you and Crystal that I could be a part of this conversation. My family is pro-union and has been. My dad was an attorney and very pro-union, and my mom was an educator before she joined the corporate world. And so this is such a meaningful conversation to me. So the fact, Bianca, that you just wrapped it around those principles, that's something that I am never going to forget. And Cheryl, I don't know if you want us to talk about the wobble or life in the wobble, or have Crystal talk about that.
No, well, I think I do. It's like we're walking through it. So from 2016 to 2021, we've had Say Her Name, we've had Black Lives Matter. You guys have bargained a contract where you've had some major victories, childcare for one, and then not just for WNBA players, like these are wins for workers. And now COVID has struck. We're getting into 2020. COVID has struck. The pandemics happen, and you're going into the bubble. I know you got in the 144, they talk about bargaining over the return to play agreement. What was that like, bargaining for that to go back in the middle of a pandemic?
You want to start?
Well,
yeah.
you want to start, Crystal?
You got it. You got it.
Well, for me, it was very scary because there was this whole talk about playing basketball, like having a season in a bubble. And quite honestly, that just sounded like something out of sci-fi, because I was like, how do you do that? What's a bubble? What does a bubble look like? This sounds really crazy. And my whole concern was for the players' health and their safety. I was like, okay, they may want to play, but I need to know that it's going to be safe for them to play. And I just kept saying that. I'm like, yeah, I hear you. And yes, I report to you. I report to the players, but I need to know it's going to be safe before I can even say, we're going to talk about what this season looks like. And the league was right there with us. I mean, safety was their concern. And how to do this, what testing was going to look like, what the protocols were going to look like from day to day, from week to week, and, what to do if and when, the worst kind of thing would happen, any player would get sick. And so we had those conversations, and I think we got to a place where we got our arms around the health and safety protocols. But in talking about a bubble, that was not what we negotiated in this 2020 agreement. Like, we're so proud of this agreement. And then, like Cheryl says, like, COVID hits, and it hits overseas. So while everybody's talking about March, let me take you back to January. We signed this agreement, this badass CBA we're so proud of. Got my player president on Good Morning America with Robin Roberts, and I'm so excited and dead tired, like haven't slept in probably weeks. And then it's February, and we're hearing from players in Turkey and Italy and France and Russia, like all over the world, saying the pandemic, COVID, like it's hitting, we've got to get home. Are we going to have access to testing? What is this going to look like? This was just a testing conversation. I know we're in the world of vaccines right now, but this was way back then. In February, we were dealing with this. So we knew, those of us in the W ecosystem, on the league and the union side, the players, we knew this was a big deal. We knew we had to scramble and figure this out. So the league was working very hard from the very beginning. So like I said, we got our arms around this. And I said, okay, it's not going to be the year we negotiated. Things are going to look different. You're going to play in a bubble, which the players quickly called the wubble. And here's how this is going to look if you want to do this. And the players said, there were some players who said, I'm concerned for my health. I'm going to opt out. That was, there were parameters around that. We negotiated, they would get their pay, full pay. There were players who said, you know what? Social justice work is so important to me right now. I need to be on the ground and in my community. And we understood that. And then there were players who said, we're coming to the wubble. But like I said, I report to the players, right? You heard me say that, right? And the players said to me, Terry, you can't sign anything unless there's a social justice provision in that agreement. And I said, yeah, okay. And they're like, no, listen to us. I remember the player, she repeated it. She said, you are not authorized to sign any side letter. You guys call it the MOU, right? You are not authorized to sign any side letter about a 2020 season in a bubble unless there's a provision that talks about our social justice work, that the league will recognize it and support it. And from that came the Social Justice Council, which is the first time, I believe, you will see labor, the players and management, the league and the teams, come to the table and say, we're going to do this together. We're going to do this social justice work together. And it's going to be led by the players. It's going to be controlled by their agenda, by the things that they identify. And that helped me get to the finish line on this social justice council, because I was in my position representing the players. I'm mindful of everything that affects them, and I don't want anything to compromise their voice. And so if we're going to do this social justice council with management, that's a big deal. Let's look this up in history. Let's Google this. Like, has this ever been done before? I don't know. If it hasn't, we're the first. If it has, we're one of the first, because I'm sure there's not very many times that you'll see this and have an agreement by management that the players will control the agenda. And that's important. And that's important. And we have really, really good conversations in our social justice council and in that work. And like I said, it's like a 180 from 2016. So here's where we are, a council, a season that is, quote, committed to social justice, end quote. That was the league's press release. We had gotten there. Gotten there.
Sorry, Terry, I didn't want to cut you off, but I mean, even coming from like a player's perspective, I mean, we had to go into this bubble and play. I think people forget that. We didn't know exactly what COVID was. People didn't know how it was going to affect us. Honestly, I was just like, this bubble is going to burst. I didn't even think we were going to be able to play. I was like, it's no way COVID's not going to get in. I know a lot of people were nervous about going. And then with everything that happened in 2020, I mean, with everything in the world, it was just kind of like, it was heavy. People were like, we don't know if we want to go in and play in this type of situation where there's so many other more important things than basketball. But I think we came together as a group and we said, we can use it, because if we're all, I mean, some people, like Terry said, they stayed home, they did social justice from home, but we decided, most of us decided as a group, we could come together and really put our message out there all together. Like, this is our biggest platform. We're not going to have this type of platform in different areas. So if we come together and come to this bubble and play for a bigger purpose, I mean, it's going to be difficult. And it was like, it was hard playing in a bubble. I mean, even our season was shortened. So games were coming like even quicker than normal. And so it's a lot of stress on your body. It's a lot of stress on your mind with everything that was going on. But I feel like our group was strong, and we had each other in the bubble. And like I said, it was very difficult. People don't even understand. Like, even if you were home, you could go to the supermarket. Like, we couldn't go to the supermarket. We all had Instacart accounts. Like, we had to get food ordered. You're always in your place. You're just living on this small campus, playing, fighting for something bigger, but it was difficult at times.
What I want people to understand is, so they've bargained, they done signed off on this historic contract. Then the pandemic starts. They start, there's have a side letter, MOU, and then we have, there's a decision to dedicate the season to say her name and Breonna Taylor. Crystal, can you speak a little to like how you guys came to that decision to really move that across for the 2020-21 season?
Yeah, people were angry. People were upset with what was going on. And like I said, we wanted to use our platform, and we wanted to put out a message for women who are forgotten, where women who no one talks about. It just, it's in the news when it might not even be in the news one day. It goes away. And we're like, we're going to use our league, a league full of majority Black women, and we're going to give people this voice. And that's really the message we wanted to have. I mean, even thinking back on it from 2020, it was special how everyone kind of came together and we all had this message, what we wanted to show the world who we were as a league and what we represented.
And I don't know, like for those that are watching, like for those that follow the league, there were plenty of, if you tune into every game, they have on shirts, Black Lives Matter. Breonna Taylor was on the back of the jerseys. Like, it was inspirational. And just to see that at every game throughout the season was really powerful. Powerful to see players doing that, powerful for the movement, for the work, and just really spoke to, and to see you all united around the importance of Black Lives Mattering. I want to play folks a snippet, another snippet of 144, because Terry and Crystal both spoke about the Social Justice Council that came about. And I really think it's worth, like this, Bianca spoke about bargaining for the common good. The Social Justice Council really lays that out. Go ahead and play.
We are dedicating this season to Breonna Taylor, a campaign committed to saying the names and fighting for justice for Black women. We will be a voice for the voiceless. There was another person shot by the police, Jacob Blake, and there's been people murdered since Breonna Taylor by the police, and there's so many countless names that don't get said. We wanted the council to be like a good mix of people with different experiences, obviously different years of service. Stewie, for example, is a person with a lot of star power who cares about these issues, who's made it known. She's a really good white ally in this space. Tiara Ruffin-Pratt has had experiences with gun violence in her own family. And Cindy Colson, she's like, I want to be involved, what can we do? Like, she was always pushing for it. Then you had Asia Wilson, who's another kind of budding voice in the social justice space, and someone who's going to be kind of the next generation after Maya Moore, Diana Taurasi, star power in this league. Satu Sabali as like the young, amazing German, outspoken person that she is. And so after having gone through all the emotional toil of everything that happened with Jacob Blake and everything that happened with the strike that day, it was important for us the next day to say, like, we need to take a pause and we need to reflect and stand in solidarity as the other 6 teams. We're fighting for all these things in this bubble and things are changing and it's great and we're saying her name, and then the despair is like, and people are literally still being shot and murdered. Black women are forgotten, and we're the Black women who are often forgotten. Like, who gets that more than our league? Because we so often don't get our stories told in the ways that men get their stories told. A big part of the Say Her Name campaign is also like honoring who the women were and the lives they lived and the people they touched and the folks they left behind. Police brutality and state violence affects like the person who lost their life, but there's this ripple effect of all the people that are left behind. It's not just the fact that one life is gone, it's like it affects people's lives, you know, the trajectory of them. So one, you have to like name the racism that's showing up in our lives, that's showing up in your families, your schools, your communities. And so that's the big step, is like addressing this so we can fight it. And then two, it's like, if we don't fight to change it, like who's going to, especially as the younger generation. Sadly, there's a lot on our shoulders to change the world right now, from like the environment to racism to disrupting the whole political system. I think the younger people are fighting to change all of that. It starts with us, and unfortunately that's how a lot of movements have gone. It's like the people, unfortunately, with the least power at the bottom have to like fight and stick together and rise up. I think particularly in the last few years you see the WNBA really owning who's in this league, and that's from their queer players to their Black players or international players, is just having like a strong identity of like, this is who we are. Our league is made up of these types of people and we're gonna own it. We're united as players, as athletes. We will never shut up and dribble because we refuse to be just used as entertainment. That like athletes really do have the power to change the world.
Yes, all of that.
I get emotional watching that. It brings me back to the bubble. It
And
brings me back.
I know we both spoke to it a little, but was there, Crystal, is there a specific moment like to read about it and then to watch the documentary? But it just seemed like everyone was united on this issue. But was there a specific moment that it was like, okay, we're going to do this and we're all on board to do it?
I think when, I don't want to say there was a specific moment, but when we decided to go into this bubble and what we were playing for, I think everyone kind of had that mindset, like, this is what we're doing this summer. This is what we're playing for. It's much bigger than basketball, but it's going to be hard, but we're going to do it. So I just feel like we really went in with that mindset, even before going into the bubble.
And
You know what, Crystal, I kind of think there might have been a couple of moments, right? When Stewie, who you everybody heard Laisha just talk about as an ally, as a white ally in the league. Stewie tweeted what the court would look like with Black Lives Matter on it, right? And that was our way of saying, come on, league, you can do this. This is a really good idea. And Stewie's tweet went viral as we thought it was going to. When Angel McCaughtry had suggested having Breonna Taylor on the back of the jerseys, and Angel's a player who's from Kentucky and had gotten to know Tamika Palmer, Breonna Taylor's mom, and invited them into that conversation that we had with Stacey Abrams and Kimberly Crenshaw. Like, there was another moment. And then there was this time in a meeting, a call that we had where one of the players said, we can do social justice together in the bubble with t-shirts. Like, we can do this, y'all. And so I think there was like a couple moments where people said, yes. And the momentum just kind of kept going and drove us down to Florida into that bubble all together.
I think, yeah, it's great to hear about, like, this is organizing. This is organizing. This is collective action. The shirts, the Black Lives Matter on the court, all the Twitter, all the social media, like, that was just, it was amazing. And I think, that's what stayed with folks and why we were still hearing about it and folks are still talking about it, because it's very relevant and timely for right now. For Terry, for you, as an advocate, for members, for players, what special needs or crises did you have to respond to, if any, during this time?
You know what, Cheryl, that's a great question. I was so focused on COVID, like I probably had the blinders on to anything else. And so I think I missed what Crystal started kind of talking about, was what life in a bubble would be, what that would feel like. Then two pandemics, the weight of two pandemics on the players. So I was so focused on the COVID, that the mental health and wellness that we had fought for and negotiated in that new CBA, like talking about what a new robust program would be. I lost sight of that. I didn't fully understand the weight. And I went down in the beginning, not at the very start when the players were there, but I was there in the beginning weeks. I left and then I came back, and I remember when I was talking to some of the players and player leadership, I said, okay, well, I'm coming back, I'll be back there. And they said, you're coming back? And I said, yes, I'm coming back. And they're like, you're coming back to the bubble? And yes, I'm coming. Like, what are we talking about? Yes, I'm coming back to the bubble. And they said, why? And I said, because you're there. This is my job. Like, I have to be there. You're there. They're like, are you sure you want to come back? Don't come. I said, no, I'm coming back. And it was from there when I got back, I started hearing more stories, and I just started seeing the weight. I had one player call me before I got back. She called me, and it was a venting session. I mean, she was upset, and she was on edge, and she was sad, and she, all of it came out, and she was crying and yelling at me and all of that. And all I kept saying was, I'm coming back. I'm going to be there. I'm coming back. Like, I want to hug you through the phone. I'm going to be there. It was a lot. It was a lot. And I just think, I know I missed it. And I didn't recognize the kinds of supports that were really needed by the players. And because I was just like, let's test, nobody get COVID. I don't want anybody to have COVID. Like, we got to get you back to your family safely. We got to get you, the moms who had come with their children into the bubble, you'll see that in 144. I was so concerned about the kids, like kids have to be safe. Like, what are we doing? Where's everybody's mask? Wear your mask. And Crystal knows they were at the pool. And I'm like, where's your mask? And they're like, Terry, we're at the pool. I said, where's your mask? Put your mask on. I went and got masks. I went and got masks and handed them out. So that's where I was. And so I missed that. I missed that part.
That was one of the things that stuck out for me in the film as a mom. It's some of the players, specifically players with young children, they took their children with them in the bubble, and some had to left them at home because they thought, thinking about childcare, and I imagine just being in a bubble is hard. And it just really resonated with me how they were united on staying together and keeping each other's spirits high. Crystal, what do you have any experience, your memories from being in the bubble?
Yeah, I would say, it was difficult for some people who didn't bring their children as well. I mean, you don't have your child for 3 months. And then even for a lot of players, I mean, we were isolated. You could bring one guest in, I think it was, Terry. You could bring a guest, but other than that, and most people didn't because there was a high cost to bring a guest in. You had to pay for their testing every day, which came to be a lot. So a lot of people just came to the bubble by themselves. They didn't have a family support system. So it was difficult for a lot of people. You're isolated. Of course you have your teammates, but I mean, it's you don't want to be around your teammates all the time. You want your family support, and you just didn't have that in a bubble. So it was very difficult for a lot of people.
And so all of this is happening. So now we're in the bubble. You guys have dedicated the season to say her name and Breonna Taylor. And then we're approaching the 2020 election season. And we start talking about rock the vote and vote for Warnock. How have the players been impacted? How did that all, the vote Warnock, come to be, and using the league as a platform for advocacy, social justice advocacy and political advocacy?
I'll start. You want to start, Crystal? I always jump. I'm sorry. Rock the Vote was a partner of the union for a few years, since 2018, I believe. And so we knew that within a social justice season, that we were going to be talking about the importance of voting. When it came to the Atlanta and the Senate race down in Atlanta, the players really took control. I will tell you, that was a completely player-led and independent of the union. Like, union staff really didn't have much to do with that. We didn't have to. I talked to you earlier about the WhatsApp chat and the communication, and how we stick to really good governance principles about getting communication out across the teams through our player reps like Crystal and others, and through our executive committee. So we had this structure. And we were just coming out of negotiations. Oh yeah, so we had this structure, this really good structure in place on how to get the word out. And so the players said, well, the union's really been nonpartisan, and we're going to keep the union nonpartisan. But when it comes to the players, well, we're going to do something, and we're going to act. And I say all the time, when you look at Atlanta and you look at that Senate race and you look at and I'll share with you more about what the players did and how they did it, they gave this country, they gave all of us a lesson in democracy. They took us back to civics 101, history 101, government 101, and how you do this, and why the vote is important, and why being educated on the vote is important, and why you got to tell your friends and bring your friends to the polls. I mean, all of that happened in the bubble. First of all, we were over 96%, 97% of all of our eligible players, because I'm not including the international players, but of the eligible players, over 97% of them were registered to vote. They had also completed the census. So the W players were talking this and posting this, and then they were taking care of business themselves, right? They were ensuring that they were also living what they were preaching. When it came to Atlanta, well, they did their research. They looked up who was running for Senate. They looked at their campaigns. They said, who are these candidates and what do they stand for? Remember that? Remember doing that? Like actually doing the work? They got on Zooms with one or more candidates. They definitely got on a Zoom with Reverend Raphael Warnock, and they learned who he was and what he was all about. And they said, he aligns with who we are. He aligns with our values. They had a couple conversations with Reverend Warnock, and they said, this is who we're going to support. And all the while they said, Terry, we got this. You're the union. You're nonpartisan. We got this. And before I knew it, I was sitting down like the rest of you all who are fans. I know Adair's a fan, with my popcorn, turning on, because I wasn't back in the bubble yet. And I turned on my television, ready for must-see TV. And the players did not disappoint, because they got off the bus. They got off bus after bus, and they looked at the schedule and they said, we want Atlanta to go first. We got these Vote Warnock t-shirts. We want Atlanta to go first. Oh, wait, this is the game we want. It's on national television. It's an ESPN game or an ABC game. So we know cameras are going to be on us. And they alerted whoever they needed to alert. The camera crew said, watch us when we get off the bus. And the cameras were there. And I'm eating my popcorn and I'm like, wow, what? Are you kidding me? Players are hopping off the bus, vote Warnock over and over and over again. The Atlanta team, the team that Atlanta was playing. And then the next time there was a nationally televised game, those teams did the same thing. And then the next time, and during their media availability, they were talking about Reverend Warnock and what they were doing, what their shirts were all about. That was a lesson in democracy, because as I've been told, as we've read, Reverend Warnock was polling in the single digits, and then this explodes all over the world. I mean, it's not just ESPN and the sports writers who are talking about it. You know, CNN and MSNBC, like the news outlets are talking, the traditional news outlets are talking about it. This was truly a viral moment. Crystal, you want to talk about what wearing that shirt was like for you?
Yeah, I remember we had the call with Reverend Warnock, and we learned what he was about, and we all kind of gathered around this idea, we're going to support him. But when we found out he won the election, I remember our team talking about it, like we really made a change. Like we really helped catapult his campaign into the next stage, from wearing our t-shirts, talking about it, just realizing our voice, just something as simple as wearing t-shirts could really create change. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but we were just so excited about it. And it was monumental for us. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it, but that was really special from last summer.
It was amazing. And before I get to my next question, I do want to take this moment to open up the chat for folks, because I know everyone here saw this unfolding last year and how amazing it were. And I just want to pose this question to you all, was if you were watching this, if you weren't, I don't know what you were doing, but I'm sure we all were there watching it. Like, how did it hit you, and how were you impacted by the organizing that was happening in the league? And I am going to ask Bianca, because as an organizer, who we've been doing this work. And I know it hit me. So how did it affect you and influence the work that you're doing, Bianca?
Absolutely. So yeah, I just want to say courage is contagious, right? We know that fear is contagious, but also that courage is contagious. And so, I'm based in New York City, which hearing you talk about the bubble, Crystal, I honestly felt like I was in a bubble in Brooklyn, New York as well, being the epicenter of the pandemic. Having some of my elder neighbors, rolled off in body bags because of COVID. I mean, the death and the devastation was really all around us, and the city was quiet. And I use Instacart a couple times too, but yeah, having that be so heavy on us, heavy on me, as an activist. And then also, the NYPD murdered my neighbor in 2018. He was experiencing a bipolar episode. And so, these issues are things that have affected me, my community, and that we've just kind of been sitting with, and having like outbursts of organizing, right? Outbursts of like, we want to do something, but never quite finding the momentum to sustain it and keep it going. And so, I remember, like everybody else, after the George Floyd murder, we really saw Minnesota step up and say, okay, now we're setting the tone. This is not okay, right? And it really gave us all the permission to feel the rage that we felt, to feel the anger, but also find some motivation and find something within us to say enough is enough, right? And so watching those protests unfold for days, and then me, myself, even, I never thought I would break my own COVID bubble or my own COVID situation. I hadn't gone outside either. And for, in months, since March, and, we're talking about May now. And so to be outside for the first time in front of the Barclays Center with thousands of people who were all demanding justice for George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for Ahmaud Arbery, for, all of the countless others who have not seen justice. I mean, it just really felt surreal. And I'll just share that, I was in the streets every single day with my community for 30 days. And I started to see the protests kind of wane off because, if you listen to the media or if you listen to anyone, they kind of tell you when it's time to move on, right? Like, okay, we've seen the thing that you've done, you've made your protests, now it's time for you to move on. And so being able to turn on the TV and see a counter message, which is, wow, these professional athletes are really putting it on the line, right? They've decided that they're not moving on, that this is actually a sense of emergency. This is a crisis, right? Inspired us to say, okay, this is not the situation as usual. We're not going back to things as usual, right? And we were able to occupy our city hall for, almost 30 days to demand, justice for our own brothers and sisters in New York City. We were able to do that looking at, folks in the WNBA also standing up, understanding that we were together in this fight, right? We were all collectively deciding that we were going to pitch in and try to affect some change here. And so that's just so motivating for us as activists to see that this is a big deal for all of us, and not, it's not something that, we're just experiencing isolated in our communities, right? And that they were able to use their platform in this way is just so powerful. Terry was talking about, remember the times when we used to educate ourselves to vote? I mean, I can't tell you as an activist how I'm like, yes, because it's like, and you have the opportunity to really teach people how to do that, right? Like, look it up, like you can Google and we can figure out who's aligned with our values. This is a serious thing, right? That we're doing. And so that was just, that courage was contagious. And I also love, I'll just say really quickly to close, the anecdote about, the union wanting to stay nonpartisan. I feel like that was a great example of, we are the union. So the players are acting, they are the union regardless of what, the official union does, right? And so we should all be taking those lessons. I remember, feeling like, oh, I'm part of the labor movement. It would be great to see some of these like organized labor come out, some of my union brothers and sisters come out and march next to me to say that they understand, what's going on here. Because we do have a privilege and a power as organized workers, right? We have collective bargaining, we have, means to organize resources and access to do political education and things. And so I was just so inspired by people acting as the union for themselves and not waiting, right, for it to happen.
Bianca, you're right on. And I'm glad you went back to that, because although that's what the players said, you're right. The players are the union. I'm not the union. The players are the union, period, the end. and I saw somebody's question, was there any blowback on us? No, there wasn't. I mean, let's be clear. And I'm not playing politics right now in this moment, but the players, we were on the right side of right there. So no, there was not any blowback, and there wasn't going to be any blowback, not on my watch. I would not have stood for any blowback, whatever that was going to look like. But I do understand the question. So no is my answer. And though, you know, we are nonpartisan, I feel as though the nature of the work and the nature of this moment pulls us in, and we can talk about voting rights, and we can talk about the census, and we can talk about policing, and we can talk about maternal health. I mean, there are so many opportunities. And my thing is, you know what? If anybody thinks in some way that is partisan or political, well, then they've missed the point. This is humanity, period, the end. And that is the work that we have been pulled into. And that is the work that I am just so proud to support these players in. I don't know if there were any other questions. I missed it. Sorry. But I did see that one. I just wanted to respond to it.
And what Terry said is just about us as workers being able to show up as our authentic selves, like you said earlier, Terry, right? And treating us as whole humans, as mothers, as daughters, as community members, right? As workers. And so I really feel like you all set the tone for what is possible in the labor movement to approach these questions differently and start to look at your members as whole humans and what their experiences are after they, you know, clock out or leave, you know, their workspace or leave that. What is their life like, and what are ways that we can use our power to leverage gains, you know, in all areas?
And I don't know if this is political, but as Crystal knows, in the work that she's doing now on the management side of the house, but you know, the players have talked about what the agenda is, what the social justice agenda is for this year, and it's 3 pillars. It's built around public health. It's built around racial justice with an emphasis on voting rights, but that includes so much. And it's built around the LGBTQ community and what equality looks like for, and to show up for them. And I'm just so proud. And if anybody thinks that is partisan or political, then okay, I guess we're there. But I see it as the work you need to do for humanity, and the work you need to do for communities, and the work you need to do to make your work environments feel good and healthy and strong. And when I see these sisters linking arms, I know that they have understood the power of the collective, the power of their voices together. And like what Crystal said, that bubble environment, that was the petri dish, that was the experiment, that was the sci-fi moment. Who knows if we will ever have, I kind of hope we do, but you know, not because of a pandemic, not because of a pandemic, Crystal, but who knows if we will ever have that moment where all 12 teams are together again, because the power of those voices was something else. And I'm hoping that that's one of the takeaways for all of you all, is just seeing that we very much see ourselves, a players association, as a union, grounded in the principles of a union, in good governance, in strong communication. You know, we depend on our player reps and our leadership, our executive committee. And we understand the power of consensus and that collective voice. Oh my goodness. It is the reason why, you know, the Black Lives Matter t-shirts and the Charlottesville protests and just everything that you have seen these women stand up for, it is the reason how that has happened, is because they have linked arms and recognized their power. And you have it also. You have it also. I hope when it is said and done that we contribute to the overall labor movement in some way, that we have, you know, demonstrate some kind of forward or progressive movement. And we will look to you all for the next set of gains and wins for all of us.
I'm following the questions, and I want to continue to pop your questions and your thoughts in the chat. Crystal, you're getting some shout outs. But one of the questions I am gonna, I'll ask that came up, and it's actually something we discussed, was, and Crystal, maybe you can speak to this, is being in the bubble. And Terry just spoke, like locking arms and doing these collective actions, wearing the shirts, from doing it all, doing all of this organizing. Was there any need for convincing or pushing back on other players, not necessarily because they didn't agree with what was going on, but just because, and I know that is one of the, something that does come up in the film, but just getting folks to be united to say, we're going to do this and we're going to walk out here together and show a united front.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, we were together. And that's why I'm so proud to be a part of this league. We're very inclusive. We give everyone a voice. And I think we really stand up for the right things. It's not just the players, if you even look at it. If you look at our staffs, people are wearing the shirts as well. It's our whole league. And I think everyone understands what we represent, and everyone has this same, I don't want to say everyone has an exact same way of thinking, but we stand for what is right. And I'm just so honored to be a part of a league like this. I mean, we're different. I really feel as a league, we are special in that way. And, we fight for everyone.
And another question that came up in the chat is, were there, and maybe Terry and Crystal, maybe you'll both be able to speak to this, but were there any other relationships or connections built with other athletes outside of the league or groups?
I know some of the players spoke with NBA players, women's soccer players, just seeing what they were doing in their leagues, figuring out. I know NECA spoke a lot with Chris Paul about how he pushed with their CBA negotiations. So yeah, we work with other athletes as well.
That's great. And we'll take one more because I'm trying to be mindful of the time. I'm looking. I am going to, I want to make sure I understand this. Being in the, do you make connections with players and other? Oh, this was the one I wanted to get to. So with being in the bubble and dealing with COVID, it was a lot, like we've already spoke to that there was a lot going on. How did you guys not stay motivated to not burn out while you were in the bubble for that long? And I do want to give a shout out to you all because they had what should be applauded. There were no COVID cases while in the bubble. No, none, not one, right? And that was 144 players plus staff and family, and they had not one case. If only we all. But how did you all keep what kept you all going?
Yeah, I'll say, like Terry mentioned before, we would be at the pool. So we had a hotel pool, and I know our team, we were always there. I just kind of had the mindset, I'm in Mexico right now. I'm not in this bubble. And that kind of just having that mindset of being able to do other things, even hanging out with your teammates, playing cards, having hobbies, reading, just trying to escape when you could, in a way, even though you really couldn't escape, just trying to have that mindset of getting away. The league did some things for us. Some days we would have a barbecue. We had like a versus night when it was Brandy versus Monica. Like that felt good. Like when we would have things like that, like, oh, okay, I feel like we're doing something tonight. Like, because we were just in this place. I mean, like you said, everyone was stuck in the house, but it was still, it felt good when we were able to do different things, or like I said, hang out. We really hung out. I was at the pool. I was probably at the pool the most in the whole bubble, honestly. So just doing things to kind of get away, even though you couldn't get away.
And I do want to ask, so now that you all spoke a little about what's sort of the victories and what's been happening. I do want to hear, like, what is next for you all? And I do want to come back to, and Terry, I guess I'll start off with this, as you had mentioned the 3 tenets, like the 3 focuses of the social justice, the advisory council. How did that come to be, the focus?
Right. Well, coming out of the bubble, the players said, if Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matters in the public health space. And it's important that we understand COVID, that we understand the vaccine. So this is last fall, coming out of the bubble. This is October, November. And the player said, Terry, get some educational Zooms together for us. And, the league asked if they could help with that. And I said, you know what, this really needs to come from the Players Association. This really needs to come from the union. We've got to do this independently. And we need to find independent medical, professionals, health professionals, folks in the public health space that were connected to the vaccine trials, the research. They touched it in some way. So we put together a 3-part series of Zooms. We had probably about 10 to 12 doctors, epidemiologists, et cetera, part of these Zooms. Players, now this is the WNBA off season, so some players are overseas playing, so they're clicking on this link and joining our Zooms from around the world to get information, to understand, and to ask all the questions that they had about COVID, about transmission, and about vaccines, about their safety. They were reading things. They weren't sure of what they were reading, if that was credible. So we put before them the credible people. And again, it came from the union. So I know that they felt good about it. They trusted that we were going to, give them the reliable folks. So Black Lives Matter in the public health space started to focus around vaccine hesitancy, vaccine confidence, and looking for ways to build that. And so you're right, Cheryl, once the players got out of the quarantine period in the bubble and through the rest of the season, there were no COVID cases. There were no positive COVID cases. And we're very proud of that. And the players are very proud of that, clearly. And so doing the work to get educated around the vaccines, we're also proud of the fact that we are the only sports league on the planet that is 99% fully vaxxed. That is a real statistic. There's a great t-shirt, breakingt.com. Let me just do a little plug that says fully vaxxed. If you're fully vaxxed, support us in that t-shirt. And the Young Black Girls STEM organization that the proceeds will benefit. But the other thing we talked about, and as Crystal said, we have members of the LGBTQ community in our league and allies of that community in our league. And so, yes, that was going to be a pillar of our work. And then when we were talking about voting, it doesn't stop just because it's not a presidential election. We started our partnership with Rock the Vote in 2018. That was a midterm election year, and we have kept it going. So what the players framed up is what they have always been doing. They just wanted to have it recognized someplace and allow as many players who wanted to dial in and get bought in and participate in any one or all of the initiatives kind of coming out of those 3 pillars. It just gave everybody a way to say, I'm a part of the social justice initiative and the agenda for the 2021 season, because there's something there for me. And again, I'm just really proud of them and their work.
And I will say that the work, the 3 pillars, the Social Justice Council, it also, it doesn't stop there. And I imagine, Crystal, I had started off by asking, what is next? Because I know there is more to come. And you've now taken on this new role as the Seattle Storm's Director of Community Engagement. for Seattle's Force for Change. What do you see? What is that new role, or what will that new role look like? And congratulations.
Thank you. Like Terry said, we don't want it to die off. We want this to keep going. We don't want it to fade into the background. And so with Seattle, we want to amplify women, especially women of color. We want to continue to support small businesses of color, small Black businesses. And then we're just going to continue to support the LGBT community. Sorry, I can't talk right now. We just want to keep that fight alive. We don't want it to die off. We don't want it, like I said, we don't want it to fade into the background, because it's happened before. It's like everyone's hyped up, everyone's talking about it all the time. I'm here in Seattle to keep it going. Hopefully I can do that.
And I'll ask you, Terry, because I know you all have had some major victories over the last 5 years, and I know there'll be more to come. What do you envision next for players in the league?
We had a phrase when we opted out. Neko Gumake penned an essay for the Players Tribune. It was called Bet on Women. And bet on women means exactly what you think it means. Bet on us, bet on girls, bet on women, invest in them, support them. Because when you support girls and women, you support boys and men, you support communities, you support families. And so for us, this, opting out of the CBA to negotiate a new CBA, what we have today, was about betting on the players, was about getting the league to recognize that their model needed to look different in order for this to be a strong, sustainable business that was around not just for the players who are in this league right now, not just for the members of our union right now, but for their sisters who are coming up, their younger sisters who are coming up. And so for us, we want to see this model for the league, the business model of the league, grow and include innovative changes and strategies, and where the players are recognized as partners in the business and growing the business. So for us, that is what's next. Of course, as proud as I am, and I'm very proud of this CBA for all the reasons that Crystal and I talked about, that Bianca has pointed out also. But we're going to look about building, looking to take it up a notch, right? Looking to see how we build on this for the next time and for the next generation. So for us, that's what's next.
Awesome. We all know organizing never stops, so I'm looking forward to see what's next. I want to thank all of the panelists for participating tonight. I want to thank the attendees of the this year's Women's School for attending. I also want to do a quick plug. I encourage everybody to catch the documentary 144. We're going to be doing a screening tomorrow on Zoom. The links will go out in the morning. And for those that are tuning in on Facebook Live, check out ESPN.com and you can watch it there. And
we're also screening it tonight too, right after.
Give us about 10 minutes to break, and we will screen it tonight if you go to this Twitch number.
Awesome. And then one last, I want to encourage everybody tomorrow at the end. Tomorrow is the last day of the Women's School. After that, you can check out Team USA and tomorrow, 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern, and they'll be playing on NBC. So I want to encourage everybody to check them out. Thank you all for joining.
That was awesome, Cheryl. And Adair, Cheryl, Bianca, Crystal, I just want to thank you again. And to everybody on this Zoom, I've been flipping through, not everybody has their camera on, but I got to tell you, this is a dynamite looking Zoom. I love this. I love this. I almost, Crystal knows, I typically say, come on camera so we can see everybody. I'm not going to do that. This is not my Zoom, but I love the faces that I see right now. And I thank you so much for being a part of this. And thank you for all the shout outs and all that in the chat. I really, really appreciate that.
It's been great conversation. Thank you.
This was amazing. You guys have a great night.
You
Thank you guys
too.
so much. I just
Standing.
want to do a bit of
Thank you.
housekeeping before we lose people. And thank you so much, Cheryl, also for moderating. Just wanted to
Thank
give
you.
a specific shout out to you. It was really incredible. This was absolutely incredible. I just have to say, you guys are all just icons. It's been